Hi, welcome to Live Brain Hack. So this brain hack says, feel better with the power of music. Singing is a complex brain function for the brain. It fires both the frontal and insular lobes. Also, music that makes you want to move your body will metabolize stress chemicals. Now, when it comes to things like music, this can actually fall in two of the phases of what we do. And so I thought this was a perfect brain hack to talk about the things we trigger, the things we use to trigger positive brain function. So one of the things I like to talk about in altering brain function, for those of you who don't know, what we do in the Inspired Evolution Project is we don't address behavior or patterns or the resulting effects of issues like thoughts or feelings or poor boundaries, things like that. We don't address that specifically. What we do is address the brain function that causes that. So ultimately in our program, our goal is to trigger the most advanced brain function we can at any given time to live the happiest, healthiest life possible. And we begin this by what we call our phases 1 and 2. And phases 1 and 2 are pretty commonly available, but a lot of things aren't fully understood about how they work. And so when I saw this Brain Hack 6, I got really kind of excited about the idea of helping people understand the differences between the phases and what really applies to what phase, because people still get this confused. We have been thoroughly convinced, and it's not 100% inaccurate, that our triggers begin with external situations or external events, or this made me feel that way, or that made me feel that way, and we tie it to specific conditions, and that is not 100% inaccurate. However, what we then try to do is control the condition instead of the thing that's actually causing the trigger, which is the way our brain responds to that condition. So traffic is a perfect example of this. Not everybody responds to being cut off in traffic the same way. Some people react very strongly. Other people don't react as much. And so the other place where I see this most, and this is what I want to address today, is I see people all the time. People say to me, well, just do this and it'll make you feel better. Just do that and it'll make you feel better. In fact, we had a conversation last week at the Clever Bean when we did our Wednesday night discussion group. And in that discussion, somebody was talking about laughter, and laughter doesn't work all the time for everybody. And it requires certain brain functions to be able to do that. The same thing is true of music, and this is why I liked music as an example for different brain functions. But first, I want to talk about how what we tend to want to do is believe that what's worked for us is going to work for everyone. And that's why some people will be really successful in a program that other people aren't quite as successful in. This is why some people will get upset in situations where other people don't. But the same thing is true of what we're doing in the different phases. So what I want to do is talk a little bit about phase 1 first, and then blend that into phase 2. And so what we're generally looking at when we're looking at our phase 1 practices is soothing behavior. It's called self-soothing behavior. It's sometimes called coping mechanisms. These are the things we do to de-stress. So the things we do to calm our system or to comfort ourselves, just to relieve the most intense of situations. The second part of phase 1, of course, is being able to observe yourself. And we've talked about that in the last couple brain hacks, so I'm not going to dig into that today. What I do want to talk about is this concept of coping mechanisms. there are so many different coping mechanisms out there because not all coping mechanisms are going to work for everyone. I want to use the example of coloring, and this is one of the things I bring up as a phase 1 practice, is these complex coloring books, the kind with like mandalas and things like that in them. So I was actually teaching a class, and I gave the rules for filling in those coloring books. So the thing that makes them most effective, which is to completely fill in each space and to take our time, to not judge it. But the other piece of advice I always give is try to stay within the lines. Now, I give this piece of advice for moving into phase 2 practices, but I remember being in one of the classes, and 2 different people told me I had just triggered them. They're like, you just stressed me out. I hate it when somebody tells me that I have to color inside of the lines. And all of a sudden, coloring inside of the lines felt like a restriction to them, felt like an oppression. And I couldn't tell them they were wrong. I knew that staying within the lines helped the practice at the next stage, and it helps the ability to focus, to try and stay within that predefined space. But I couldn't tell them they were wrong for having the other opinion. And this is a good example of how the rules in our brain will respond to different situations differently. And so when we're looking at something like coloring or music, so Brain Hack 6 talks about music, there are different types of music, and different types of music, it's not that we just like different genres or that we like different songs, but we can like or dislike the same song depending on the day. And so one of the examples I use for this is 80s alternative music. I love 80s alternative music. I feel happy when I listen to it. I want to sing. I want to dance. I'm in a good mood, unless I'm triggered, unless I'm in a negative trigger. If I am triggered and some upbeat, happy music like 80s alternative comes on, it will actually further agitate me. So one of the good ways to tell where you are is to get to know the practices that soothe you. So for example, when I am in a triggered state, if I'm something bad has happened and I'm feeling it all triggered, I like Asian flute music, like the Asian meditation music, and depending on the day, the specific thing I like varies. Sometimes I just like the flute music. Sometimes I want to listen to birds chirping or nature sounds. Sometimes I want to listen to wind chimes, and I know wind chimes can be a trigger for some people, but understanding that if I get agitated when 80s alternative music comes on, I'm not going to just say, oh, I need to adjust what I'm doing. I'm going to recognize, oh, that must mean I'm triggered. That must mean that my systems are activated, my amygdala systems. And so it's really important for me to utilize that information. And that's what this program is all about. It's all about awareness. It's all about this maturing of consciousness in each of us. And consciousness does not mean enlightenment. It doesn't mean I'm somehow superior to others. What consciousness is just awareness. How aware am I? And what we're trying to develop is self-awareness, to be aware that if I'm in a bad mood, it just means I'm in a triggered state, because if I can become aware of that, then I have the capability of moving out of it. So when we're talking about music, music is a good example of a good way to gauge where you are. So the kind of music we're talking about in Brain Hack 6, where we're talking about firing frontal and insular lobes, that really has to do with music that we're going to listen to in moving it more into phase 2 than phase 1. So we can look at this music for phase 1. And this is, I really want to use this today to help you understand the differences between the practices. So music that we're using for phase 1, anything we're using for phase 1 is supposed to have a soothing, calming ability. So if I'm angry, if I'm heartbroken, if I'm confused, if I'm frustrated, if I'm fatigued or depressed, if I have anxiety or PTSD, I'm using this music to calm the more extreme side of the emotion. So the more the amygdala is engaged, the more heightened our emotional response. So if I'm just a little moody, my amygdala is not quite as engaged as if I'm in rage or anxiety or freaking out, having a panic attack. So a panic attack would be more on the extreme side of the amygdala, but cranky and moody and not being internally happy, those are also signs of a trigger. They're just not as extreme a trigger, so we're not feeling quite as threatened, but we can still use the same practices to soothe the systems. So one of the most important things to do as we move forward is to know our practices. We also need to understand those are going to change. What works will only work for a while, because as the brain evolves, it will demand to be challenged. So I am going to let you know that on the website, on our Inspired Evolution Project website, and that's just inspiredevolutionproject.com, if you go into the menu and to where it says store, there's phase 1 practice log, phase 2, and along with the practice log, it gives you a list of suggested exercises. And so in doing those suggested exercises, we can get to know how it shifts us. So one of the things I talk about is we should be able to be in a state where if I'm in a bad mood and I listen to this specific music, I am not in a bad mood anymore. Now, I may not be my most cheerful self, but I'm better than I was. Now, this is easy to tell when we are suffering a panic disorder, because I'm in the panic attack and then I feel a significant difference when I'm not in a panic state anymore. But we need to get to know the more subtle cues too. So maybe I'm feeling agitated and I just put on some meditation music and I feel more relaxed and a little less agitated. This is a good sign that the phase 1 practice is working. Now, I do like to remind people, a lot of people that begin the program, I do stress how important it is to not move out of phase 1 too fast. You do want to connect with understanding that how you experience life is chemical related, but you don't want to stay in phase 1 practices. You've been doing that your whole life. You've been getting stressed and then de-stressing, or feeling hurt and upset and then soothed yourself. This is what we do. That's what it is when we've had heartbreak and eat a pint of ice cream, or when we've been angry and we pause to take deep breaths. That is exactly what we're doing, is a phase 1 practice. But this is a pattern we want to break. We don't want to just use this process to calm ourselves. So we really want to move into phase 2. So hopefully I've made it really clear what phase 1 is. Phase 1 is just the soothing. Now I want to talk about phase 2 practices. And again, there's some phase 2 logs on the website, so you can find those there as well. Phase 2 is really about triggering that prefrontal cortex. So it's really about bringing ourselves into a space, usually of concentration. So this is where when we're coloring, we might shift to coloring with our non-dominant hand. This is where we're becoming more focused. So I talk about learning something new or driving someplace new, like taking a different route home from work or something, because it causes us to pay attention. It causes us to heighten our awareness, to become more present. This is what mindfulness practices are. This is about getting into a space where we're in an observational state. When the amygdala triggers, it turns off. the prefrontal cortex. Conversely, when we fire that prefrontal cortex, it reduces the amygdala if we do it the right way. So phase 2 practices are really about coming very much into the present moment, getting our head out of the past and the future and all that ruminating. Self-awareness can be really detrimental when that self-awareness means all we're aware of is our own story, when we're so absorbed with ourselves that we can't get past it. So concentration and learning something new is one way to do this. But when we're looking at Brain Hack 6, we're looking at the power of music to start utilizing resources of the brain that are only available in humans. So there are other animals that can sing, like if you connect thoughts like a bird singing, but that bird is vocalizing its speech, just like humans vocalize our speech. When we sing and dance to music, we are engaging parts of the brain that are purely human. Now, other animals are picking this up. You can see a lot of really cool videos of huskies on the internet trying to sing. And it's really interesting, the theories behind why huskies do that. And I'm going to avoid going there because we're almost at our 20 minutes. But we're using more complex human brain functions when we do this. So literally just spending time every day dancing and singing, that can be your 20-minute practice. Learning something new. Remember to try and make it something that's hard for you. So don't just sing and dance. Find a way during the day to challenge your brain to work the muscle. But if you've been agitated and you've first listened to some soothing music and you want to break out of those patterns, happy music is a good way to do that. Having PTSD, my worst triggered state was always the morning. First thing in the morning, I would wake up pessimistically. I'd be like, I have too much to do. I'll never get it done. I didn't want to get out of bed. I was hitting my snooze all the time. So one of the things I did is I have all the music that makes me want to dance in a playlist on Spotify, and I've connected it to my alarm. So the first thing that plays in the morning is music that I know makes me happy so that I can begin that. Now, when I had PTSD, I could not wake up to that music. I needed something that was more soothing. So I had something that was more along the lines of like birds chirping or water sound, something that was soothing, but that would wake me up gently. Get yourself in the habit of doing something, setting up some patterns to help that. Now, again, the practices, I suggest doing them right before you go to sleep. That'll help with how you wake up. But throughout the day, give yourself opportunities for this. Set alarms on your phone that to and from work, you're listening to happy music, music that makes you happy. We had a great conversation on Sunday at one of the advanced groups, and we were talking about this concept of information we take in through television, through movies. Our brain is experiencing all of this as reality. So if you're a person that loves horror movies and yet you wonder why you have nightmares, it has to do with the amount of information we feed to the brain. So feeding this concept of singing and dancing to the brain once a day at least starts to tell the brain, I'm a happy person living a happy life. And these things do help us reprogram our brain. We don't want to get stuck in them, though. We don't want to rely on the practice. And so for some people, they're to the point where singing and dancing is always readily available, no matter how stressed they are, that they can go to this practice because it's not necessarily phase 2 for them anymore. The important thing we need to remember when we're delineating between phase 1 and phase 2 is the fact that phase 1 practices soothe, phase 2 practices challenge. They require focus and full presence. They require us to be in this moment. So keeping track of those so we know when to soothe and when to challenge. Because if we try to challenge when we need soothing, it won't work. But if we try to just soothe when it's time to challenge, we won't make progress. So these two, getting to know what practices are for you, there's not a standard. I have a list and it says listen to soothing music when you're triggered. But for some people, they can listen to music that they like to sing when they're triggered. So nothing is going to apply to everybody. We are all so unique. One thing isn't going to work for all of us. The most important thing you need to do is to learn what works for you, what soothes me, what challenges me. And when you get to the point where you're good at getting into that focused, centered state, at that point, you're ready to move on to phase 3 and the more complex practices of this program. So I hope that makes sense. I hope it clears it up a little bit. I'm pretty close to my 20 minutes, just a touch over. If you want more, you can check out our website, check out our meetup groups. We have a group going private on February 15th. That group has a lot of extra free stuff. There is a membership fee to that, but you get extended videos on the brain hacks. You get a lot of cool stuff. In fact, I'm going to have some discount coupons for classes going on there. If you're just looking for free right now, of course, Inspired Create a Life You Love on Meetup is a free class. You can find that by just Googling Inspired Create a Life You Love Meetup, and it'll take you right there. We have a private group on Facebook, Inspired Evolution Project. Share a lot of stuff there. There are just a lot of opportunities to get involved. Check out our online courses. And one of the things I'm going to recommend is trying the Introduction to Brain Chemistry course. It is available on YouTube, just in video. But if you want the video plus some content and exercises to do, it is available on our website at under courses, Introduction to Brain Chemistry, and that brings up all the triggers, all the stuff we're addressing in these brain hacks. It reviews that, explains it, gives you exercises and practices. It's a really great course. So there are a lot of ways to try what we're doing. Hopefully these brain hacks are helping. Hopefully you're getting what you need. If you ever have any questions, please post them in comments. I'm happy to respond. It's hard for me to respond during the video, but I'm happy to respond after. But yeah, send us messages or put your comments in there. Share. What I'd love to see everyone do today is share in comments what works for you. What's your phase 1, phase 2 go to? What helps you the most? Because if it's helping you, it might help somebody else. And they can at least give it a try if they're out there searching for their practices. So again, I really appreciate everyone joining me. I'm so excited to be doing these brain hacks. I'm hoping I'm giving you information that's bringing you more clarity through the process. Again, if you have any requests for a brain hack, add it into comments and I will address it in an upcoming edition. I'm picking those every week. So anybody that's sending me requests, they're getting their requests answered. So thanks again. And however you decide to move forward in your journey, whether you decide to become involved in what we do or you find something else, however you move forward, I wish you tremendous success in your journey. I hope everyone has an absolutely amazing day.